We often think of peace as something that comes when the chaos around us settles, when the emails slow down, when the deadlines ease, when the noise of the world quiets. But real peace, lasting peace, doesn't come from external circumstances. It comes from within. And it begins with clarity. Clarity is not just knowing what we want, it's understanding why we want it. It's about stripping away the unnecessary, the distractions, the things that pull us in 100 different directions. When our minds are cluttered with doubts, obligations, and endless choices, peace feels impossible. Not because we don't want it, but because we are too overwhelmed to see the path toward it. Think about the moments when you've felt the most at peace. Maybe it was a conversation where everything just made sense. Maybe it was a time when you were completely immersed in something meaningful, something bigger than yourself. In those moments, it wasn't just that the world around you was calm, it was that your mind was clear. You knew exactly why you were there, what you were doing, and what mattered most. But in today's world, clarity is hard to find. We are bombarded with information, endless streams of content, opinions, and expectations. We are told what success should look like, what happiness should feel like, what our priorities should be. And the more we let these external voices shape our thinking, the harder it becomes to hear our own. The truth is, most of the stress we feel doesn't come from the work we do, but from the uncertainty about why we're doing it. The pressure isn't just from deadlines or responsibilities. It's from the fear of making the wrong choice, of not being enough, of chasing things that don't truly fulfill us. And that's why clarity is so essential, because when we are clear on our purpose, the noise fades. Decisions become simpler. Stress becomes manageable. We stop chasing things that don't align with who we are, and we start moving with intention. Think about a great leader, someone who inspires you. They don't have all the answers. They don't control every variable, but what they do have is clarity. Clarity in their vision, clarity in their values, clarity in their purpose. And because of that, they can navigate uncertainty without losing their sense of direction. They are able to inspire others, not because they offer guarantees, but because they offer something even more powerful, certainty in what they stand for. The same applies to us. If we want to find peace, we must first find clarity. Clarity about who we are, what we believe in, and what truly matters. And once we have that, peace is no longer something we chase. It's something we create. We live in a world that rewards action. Move fast, achieve more, stay ahead. We are constantly told that success comes from what we do, how much we accomplish, how efficiently we perform. But what if the real key to clarity isn't found in doing more, but in understanding why we are doing it in the first place? The human mind is a problem-solving machine. Give it a task, and it will work relentlessly to figure out the best way to complete it. But here's the problem. If we don't first establish why something matters, our minds will waste energy solving problems that don't actually serve us. We will spend time chasing goals that don't fulfill us, working hard at things that don't align with who we are, and wondering why we still feel exhausted, anxious, or lost. Clarity doesn't come from having fewer choices. It comes from knowing which choices align with our purpose. When we lack clarity, we become overwhelmed by endless possibilities. Every option seems equally urgent, every path equally viable. And so instead of moving forward with confidence, we hesitate, we overthink, we doubt ourselves. But the moment we define our why, the fog lifts. The unnecessary fades away, and the right path becomes obvious. Imagine you're standing at a crossroads, faced with multiple directions. If you don't know where you're going, every path looks equally valid. You analyze, you weigh pros and cons, you stress over making the wrong choice. But if you know exactly where you want to end up, the decision is easy. You simply take the path that leads you there. This is the power of why. It acts as a compass, giving us direction in moments of uncertainty. We see this everywhere. People who are deeply fulfilled in their work don't necessarily have the easiest jobs. They don't always have the best resources, the most ideal circumstances, or the smoothest journeys. What they do have is a clear understanding of why they do what they do. And because of that, they can push through challenges, stay focused on what matters, and tune out distractions that would otherwise pull them off course. Think about a time when you felt truly clear-headed, when you knew exactly what needed to be done and felt completely aligned with your actions. Chances are it wasn't because the task was simple. It was because you knew why it mattered. You weren't second-guessing yourself. You weren't looking over your shoulder, wondering if you should be doing something else. You were fully present, fully engaged, fully committed. And that's the difference. Without why, our minds become cluttered. We fill them with unnecessary worries, endless comparisons, and misplaced priorities. We chase things that don't fulfill us, and when we finally achieve them, we wonder why we still feel unsatisfied. But when we start with why, everything shifts. Our energy goes toward things that matter. Our actions become more deliberate. Our minds become less burdened, less scattered, less weighed down by indecision. This is why some of the most successful people seem to have an almost unshakable sense of clarity. It's not because they have all the answers. It's because they have the right questions. They don't just ask, what should I do next? They ask, why am I doing this at all? And in that answer, they find the clarity that so many others spend their lives searching for. Our world is louder than ever. Every second we are bombarded with information, emails, notifications, opinions, trends, breaking news, unsolicited advice. We wake up and the noise begins immediately. Our phones light up with messages. Social media feeds us an endless stream of updates, and the world demands our attention before we've even had a moment to check in with ourselves. And yet, amidst all this noise, we wonder why we feel exhausted, distracted, and overwhelmed. We struggle to focus, not because we lack discipline, but because we are drowning in a sea of voices telling us what to think, what to do, and who to be. The problem is, we mistake noise for knowledge. We assume that staying informed means consuming more, that being productive means filling every moment with work, that being connected means being available at all times. But in reality, the more noise we allow into our lives, the harder it becomes to hear ourselves. Think about the last time you felt truly present, a moment where you weren't checking your phone, where you weren't worried about what was happening next, where you weren't comparing yourself to someone else's highlight reel, a moment where you felt calm, grounded, and in control. Chances are that moment didn't come from consuming more, it came from less. Less distraction, less comparison, less pressure. Noise isn't just external, it's internal too. It's the endless loop of thoughts that replay in our minds, the self-doubt that tells us we're not good enough, the fear of missing out that makes us say yes to things we don't actually want to do, the pressure to keep up, to do more, to be more. And so we fill our time with things that don't serve us. We scroll through feeds that make us feel inadequate. We engage in conversations that drain us. We chase after things that don't align with our values. And at the end of the day, we wonder why we feel restless, disconnected, and exhausted. It's not because we're not doing enough. It's because we're doing too much of the wrong things. The solution isn't to work harder. It's not to consume more information, read more news, or keep up with every new trend. The solution is to create space, to be intentional about what we allow into our minds, to recognize that not everything deserves our attention. Great leaders, great thinkers, great creators, they don't succeed because they absorb the most information. They succeed because they know what to ignore. They understand that clarity comes from focus, and focus requires eliminating distractions. They aren't constantly reacting to the world around them. They carve out time for thinking, for reflection, for real connection. We have to ask ourselves, what is the noise in our lives? What are we holding on to that isn't serving us? What distractions are we allowing to pull us away from what actually matters? Because until we let go of the noise, we will never find the clarity we're looking for. Freedom. It's a word we all love. The idea of living life on our own terms, doing what we want, when we want. It's the dream, isn't it? To wake up with no constraints, no restrictions, no obligations holding us back. We crave the ability to be spontaneous, to have control over our time, to live without limits. But here's the irony. The very thing that gives us that freedom isn't the absence of structure. It's discipline. We tend to think of discipline as the opposite of freedom, that discipline means rigid schedules, strict routines, and a life devoid of fun or flexibility. But in reality, discipline is the foundation of true freedom. It's what allows us to move through life with confidence, knowing that we are in control of our actions rather than being controlled by circumstances. Think about an artist. We often romanticize creativity as something spontaneous, something that just happens in moments of inspiration. But the truth is, the greatest artists don't wait for inspiration to strike. They have a disciplined practice. They show up every day, put in the work, and through that discipline, they create the space for inspiration to flow. Without structure, their creativity would be erratic. With it, they are free to express themselves fully. The same is true for athletes. The most talented athletes in the world don't just rely on their natural abilities. They train relentlessly. They follow strict regimens. They practice the same movements over and over again, and they adhere to routines that allow them to perform at their best. Their discipline isn't a limitation. It's what gives them the freedom to execute flawlessly when it matters most. In our own lives, we see the same principle at play. We all want financial freedom, but that freedom only comes from the discipline of managing money wisely. We want the freedom to pursue our passions, but that freedom only exists if we have the discipline to build the necessary skills and put in the effort. We want the freedom to have meaningful relationships, but that requires the discipline of showing up, communicating, and investing in those connections consistently. When we lack discipline, we don't gain freedom, we lose it. Without discipline, our time is consumed by distractions. We react to life instead of shaping it. We drift instead of moving with purpose. We waste opportunities, not because we don't have potential, but because we don't have the structure to turn that potential into something real. Look at any successful person, any fulfilled person, and you will see discipline at the core of their lives. Not because they are naturally more disciplined than the rest of us, but because they understand that discipline isn't about restriction, it's about liberation. It's about creating the habits, the structures, and the systems that allow us to thrive, that free us from the chaos of indecision, procrastination, and regret. The irony is that the more disciplined we are, the more control we have over our lives. The more we commit to the daily practices that align with our values, the more freedom we create for ourselves. The freedom to do meaningful work, the freedom to have peace of mind, the freedom to live a life that isn't dictated by distractions or impulses, but by purpose and intention. We live in a world that constantly tells us to focus on me, my goals, my success, my happiness. We are taught that fulfillment comes from looking out for ourselves first. That if we can just achieve more, earn more, gain more recognition, then we will finally feel complete. But time and time again, we see people who seem to have it all and yet still feel empty. They hit their milestones, they reach the top of their fields, and instead of feeling fulfilled, they feel lost. And that's because true fulfillment doesn't come from serving ourselves. It comes from serving others. It's counterintuitive, isn't it? We assume that the more we prioritize ourselves, the happier we'll be. But the reality is, the more we give, the more we grow, the more we contribute, the more we find meaning. The more we focus on lifting others, the more we lift ourselves. Think about the moments in your life that have brought you the deepest sense of satisfaction. Chances are, they weren't the moments where you were solely focused on personal gain. They were the moments where you made a difference, where your efforts helped someone else, where your presence mattered to another person. Maybe it was mentoring a colleague. Maybe it was supporting a friend through a tough time. Maybe it was being there for your family when they needed you most. Those are the moments that stick with us because deep down we are wired for connection, not competition. Great leaders understand this better than anyone. They don't lead for personal power or prestige. They lead because they believe in something bigger than themselves. They don't ask, "How can I win?" They ask, "How can I help?" They recognize that leadership is not about authority, it's about service. And in doing so, they create cultures where people feel seen, valued, and inspired to give their best. The irony is that the people who give the most often feel the richest, not in money, but in meaning. They don't wake up every morning consumed by stress over their own status. They wake up with a sense of purpose, knowing that what they do matters, not just to them, but to the people around them. They experience a level of fulfillment that success alone can't provide because they understand that real impact isn't measured by personal achievements, but by how many lives we touch. And yet, choosing service over self isn't always easy. We live in a fast-paced world where it's tempting to prioritize ourselves first, to chase the next big thing, to believe that happiness lies just beyond the next promotion, the next milestone, the next achievement. But time and again, we see that fulfillment doesn't come from getting more. It comes from giving more. Think about the most admired individuals in history, the ones who have left a lasting impact. They weren't the ones who hoarded success for themselves. They were the ones who gave freely, who dedicated their lives to something beyond their own interests. They weren't just great because of what they achieved. They were great because of who they helped along the way. When we shift our mindset from "what can I get" to "how can I serve," something remarkable happens. The pressure to prove ourselves fades. The need to constantly compare disappears. The weight of self-doubt lessens because when we focus on something bigger than ourselves, we stop being consumed by the small things that hold us back. We stop measuring our worth by personal accomplishments and start measuring it by the difference we make in the lives of others. In the end, service doesn't take away from our success. It amplifies it. It doesn't hold us back. It sets us free. Because the greatest legacy we can leave isn't what we achieve for ourselves, but in what we do for those around us. We live in a world that glorifies speed. We move fast, we think fast, we work fast. We celebrate productivity, efficiency, and the ability to multitask. Every minute of our day is accounted for. Meetings, emails, deadlines, social obligations. And if we ever find ourselves with an open moment, we immediately fill it. We check our phones, we refresh our feeds, we consume more information. But here's the paradox. The more we fill our time, the less we actually gain from it. The busier our minds become, the harder it is to think clearly. The more we chase productivity, the more we lose touch with our own thoughts. We convince ourselves that stillness is unproductive, that reflection is a luxury, that if we're not constantly doing something, we're falling behind. But the opposite is true. Some of the greatest breakthroughs, the deepest insights, and the most meaningful moments don't come from doing more, they come from slowing down. Stillness is not about idleness. It's not about doing nothing. It's about creating space. Space to think, space to listen to our own thoughts, space to process what's happening in our lives instead of just reacting to it. Look at the people who have made a real impact in the world. Leaders, innovators, creators. They don't just fill their schedules with endless tasks. They create time for stillness. They prioritize reflection. They understand that without time to pause, they can't see the bigger picture. They know that clarity doesn't come from movement alone. It comes from stopping long enough to truly see. Think about the last time you had a moment of real insight. It probably didn't come when you were rushing through your day. It likely came in a quiet moment, when you were walking alone, sitting in a peaceful place, or simply taking a deep breath between the chaos. That's because our minds need stillness to process, to connect dots, to make sense of our experiences. Without reflection, we are just moving from one thing to the next without understanding where we are actually going. There's a reason why some of the most successful people in history, philosophers, artists, scientists, valued solitude. They knew that stepping away from the noise wasn't an escape. It was essential. Albert Einstein would take long walks in nature. Steve Jobs was known for his silent meditation retreats. Great thinkers, great leaders, great visionaries all understood that stillness is where clarity is found. And yet, in today's world, we resist it. We avoid stillness because it forces us to face ourselves. It brings up the thoughts we've been pushing away. It forces us to confront the questions we've been too busy to ask. Are we living in alignment with our values? Are we pursuing what truly matters or just what looks good on the surface? Are we reacting to life or are we intentionally shaping it? These are the questions that only stillness can answer. Reflection is how we make sense of our experiences. It's how we learn from our past, how we recognize our patterns, how we grow. Without it, we just repeat the same mistakes, follow the same distractions, chase the same illusions. Stillness is not a weakness. It's not wasted time. It's where wisdom is born. It's what allows us to reset, to recalibrate, to realign ourselves with what truly matters. And when we give ourselves permission to pause, we don't fall behind. We move forward with greater clarity, greater purpose, and greater intention. Success. It's a word we hear constantly. From the time we're young, we're told to chase it, to achieve it, to measure ourselves by it. But have we ever stopped to ask what success actually means? Or did we simply adopt someone else's definition without question? Society gives us a clear picture of success. A high-paying job, a big house, financial security, recognition, status. We grow up believing that the more we accumulate, the higher we climb, the more successful we are, and so we chase it. We work harder, push ourselves further, sacrifice more, believing that once we reach a certain level, we will finally feel fulfilled. But here's the problem. If success is only measured by external achievements, why do so many people who have everything still feel empty? Why do some of the wealthiest, most accomplished individuals struggle with dissatisfaction, burnout, even depression? If success alone guaranteed happiness, wouldn't they be the most fulfilled people in the world? The truth is, success, at least how it's traditionally defined, is not the same as fulfillment. It's entirely possible to be wildly successful by society's standards and still feel deeply unfulfilled. Because success, as we've been taught to define it, is often focused on what we get. Money, status, accolades. But fulfillment comes from what we give. Purpose, contribution, meaning. So maybe the problem isn't that we haven't achieved enough. Maybe the problem is that we've been measuring success all wrong. Think about the moments in your life that have brought you the greatest sense of joy or meaning. Were they the moments where you won an award, got a promotion, or bought something expensive? Or were they the moments when you felt deeply connected to something bigger than yourself, when you helped someone, created something meaningful, or made a difference in someone's life? Too often, we measure success by comparison. We look at someone else's life, their career, their accomplishments, and we use it as a yardstick for our own worth. We assume that if they have more, we must be falling behind. But success is not a one-size-fits-all formula. It is deeply personal. What brings one person fulfillment might leave another feeling empty. And yet, we rarely pause to ask, what does success actually mean to me? The people who are truly successful, not just in wealth, but in fulfillment, are the ones who have taken the time to define success for themselves. They don't chase what looks good on the surface, they chase what feels right in their soul. They prioritize meaning over status, purpose over approval, impact over accolades. They understand that true success is not just about achieving, it's about aligning their work with their values, their goals with their passions, their life with their beliefs. And when we start redefining success in this way, everything changes. We stop living by someone else's standards. We stop chasing things that don't actually fulfill us. We stop measuring our worth by numbers, salary, likes, titles, and start measuring it by something far more meaningful: the depth of our impact, the strength of our relationships, the sense of purpose we wake up with every morning. It doesn't mean that traditional success doesn't matter. Ambition, achievement, financial stability, these are all valuable, but they are not the measure of success. They are just one piece of a much bigger puzzle, a puzzle that includes peace of mind, relationships, health, passion, contribution. Because at the end of the day, what's the point of success if it costs us our happiness? What's the point of reaching the top if we feel empty when we get there? The greatest leaders, the most fulfilled individuals, the people who leave a lasting impact on the world, they don't just chase success, they redefine it. They build lives that are not just impressive on the outside, but deeply meaningful on the inside, and that is the kind of success that actually lasts. We live in a world that conditions us to think in terms of wins and losses, success and failure. We are taught to set goals, achieve them, and then move on to the next thing. We measure progress in numbers: how much money we make, how many followers we have, how many milestones we've checked off. Life becomes a series of finish lines. A race where we are constantly chasing the next level, the next promotion, the next achievement. And yet, despite reaching our goals, despite accumulating more, many of us still feel restless. We achieve what we set out to accomplish, but instead of feeling a deep sense of peace, we feel the pressure to keep going, to maintain, to compete, to avoid falling behind. We wonder why the satisfaction doesn't last, why every success feels fleeting, why no matter how much we accomplish, there's always something else pulling at us. A finite mindset is built on the belief that life is a series of games with clear winners and losers, that success is about getting ahead, and that peace comes only when we've secured our position at the top. But the reality is, life is not a game with a final score. There is no singular moment where we can say, I've won, I can stop now. Life is not finite, it's infinite. And the sooner we embrace that, the sooner we can shift our mindset to one that leads to true, lasting peace. The problem with a finite mindset is that it makes peace conditional. It tells us, I will feel at peace when I get the job, when I make enough money, when I achieve a certain status, when I've proven myself. But the moment we get what we want, the goalposts move. We reach one milestone and another appears. The world keeps changing, new challenges arise, and we're back to chasing the next thing. The finite mindset is built on the idea of scarcity, that there isn't enough success, money, or happiness to go around, that if someone else wins, we lose, that we must constantly prove our worth, defend our status, and compete to stay relevant. But when we operate this way, peace is impossible, because peace doesn't come from external validation. It comes from internal stability. And stability doesn't exist in a world where everything is temporary. Titles fade, wealth fluctuates, trends change. If our sense of fulfillment depends on things that can be taken away, we will always live in fear. Fear of losing, fear of failing, fear of not being enough. And a life driven by fear will never lead to true peace. The alternative is an infinite mindset, a way of thinking that is not about winning or losing, but about constant growth. A mindset that is not focused on beating others, but on being better than we were yesterday. An approach to life that prioritizes meaning over metrics, contribution over competition, purpose over short-term gains. An infinite mindset recognizes that life is not about reaching an endpoint. It's about the journey itself. It understands that fulfillment is not a destination, it's a way of being. And when we embrace this, everything shifts. Instead of chasing temporary victories, we start focusing on long-term impact. Instead of defining success by comparison, we define it by alignment. Alignment with our values, our purpose, our deeper sense of self. Instead of constantly proving ourselves, we start improving ourselves. And instead of living in fear of losing what we have, we learn to embrace change, knowing that growth is always possible. One of the most powerful aspects of an infinite mindset is that it is rooted in purpose. People who find lasting peace aren't the ones who have won the most competitions or accumulated the most wealth. They are the ones who have something bigger than themselves driving them forward, a mission, a cause, a deep internal reason for doing what they do. When we have a strong sense of purpose, we stop measuring our lives by external standards. We stop needing to prove our worth through achievements. We stop defining success by how much we accumulate and instead by how much we contribute. And when our focus shifts from getting to giving, from winning to serving, we start to experience a different kind of peace. A peace that doesn't fade when circumstances change. A peace that is rooted in something deeper than temporary success. Peace isn't found in quick wins or short-term victories. It's found in the long game. It's found in choosing patience over urgency, resilience over perfection, and progress over immediate results. It's found in trusting the process, even when things don't go as planned. An infinite mindset understands that setbacks are part of the journey, that failure isn't the end, it's a lesson, that growth doesn't happen overnight. It happens through consistency, through learning, through showing up even when things are difficult. And when we embrace this, we stop fighting against the natural flow of life. We stop trying to control every outcome, and we learn to trust ourselves, trust the process, and trust that as long as we keep moving forward, we are exactly where we need to be. One of the most profound shifts that an infinite mindset brings is perspective. When we let go of the idea that life is a race with a finish line, we start to appreciate the present. We stop seeing every challenge as an obstacle and start seeing it as an opportunity. We stop obsessing over where we should be and start embracing where we are. And this perspective is what creates lasting peace. Because peace doesn't come from perfect circumstances. It doesn't come from finally arriving. It comes from knowing that we are on the right path, even if we haven't figured everything out yet. It comes from recognizing that the goal is not to win, but to grow, not to reach the top, but to keep learning, evolving, and becoming the best version of ourselves. An infinite mindset is not about abandoning ambition. It's about redefining it. It's about realizing that success isn't about beating others. It's about living in alignment with our values. That fulfillment isn't about reaching a certain status. It's about contributing to something meaningful. That peace isn't something we get when we achieve enough. It's something we cultivate by embracing the journey itself. Peace is not something we stumble upon by accident. It is not a reward for achieving more. Nor is it something we can chase in the external world. Peace is cultivated. It is a practice. It is a way of thinking, a way of being, and it starts with clarity. When our minds are filled with noise, expectations, comparisons, self-doubt, endless distractions, we cannot see clearly. We move through life reacting instead of living intentionally. We chase success without asking what it truly means to us. We seek fulfillment in temporary achievements only to find ourselves searching again. But when we create space for stillness, when we strip away the unnecessary, when we become intentional about what we allow into our minds, we gain clarity. And clarity is what leads to true peace. Peace is not the absence of problems. It is not a life free from challenges. It is the ability to remain grounded despite them. It is the freedom that comes when we stop living in reaction to the world and start living in alignment with ourselves. It is found in an infinite mindset, one that is not consumed by winning or losing, but by learning, growing, and contributing to something greater. To clear our minds is to give ourselves the gift of perspective. To recognize that we are not defined by external noise, but by the values we choose to uphold. To let go of what does not serve us, to embrace what truly matters, and to trust that peace is not something we find, it is something we create.